think I may have got it working. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Hi, Breanne.
Great.
Welcome.
Hello. I don't have a video, but I have audio.
All right, that's pretty good. Thank you for coming on. Everybody, welcome to another edition of Horror Pop After Midnight. And my guests tonight are, filmmakers and writers, Matthew and Nathaniel Barber, which are brothers, and of course, the actress, Breanne Solis. And we're going to talk about the horror short film, The Specter of Weeping Hill. How's it going, guys?
Good. How's it going with you?
It's great. We're good.
How'd you come up with the idea of a Specter of Weeping Hill? I loved how you made it more like a 70s type of horror film. Kind of remind me of one of those 70s films you would go to a drive-in theater.
Mm-hmm. It was originally, I guess the actual concept just came out because we knew that Breanne, actually, her father had a coffin.
Okay.
For like a Halloween display and that kind of thing. And that was where we were like, well, we know we can get a coffin. So that was kind of the starting point. And then we, later on, once we started working on the script, we decided that the coffin was a little too fancy for the time period. Because pretty much the coffin is supposed to be from like the 1860s. And the one that Breanne's father had was more a little fancy. It was a little fancy. It was a little more model.
Yeah, it was a child.
It was a child. So that's where that came from. But it was like more fancy. When I did research and I saw that it was fancier than Abraham Lincoln's coffin, it's like, okay, that's maybe a little too much. But we just wanted to make something kind of like Washington Irving's Legend of Sleepy Hollow, like the story.
Yeah. And
just do kind of a version of that, but with a bit of a Civil War spin on the ghost story, because I wanted to do something that was more like a classic haunting, where you have the woman, like there's it's like the woman in white is kind of what they call them, where there's a haunting where a woman looks out a window, looking for her lost love who's lost at sea or something like that, and that was kind of where it spawned from. And then we took a lot of inspiration from movies like Salem's Lot, and then Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and Jason Lives. Were just the cemetery scenes in those movies were obsessed with capturing that tone, and that kind of created the story. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Breanne, how'd you become part of this project?
So I've actually worked with the Barbers on past films, and so this was just another one that they reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to be a part of this one? And I said yes.
That's pretty good. Where it starts off, you're in a car and you pull up to the cemetery because you were going through the grieving process because your character lost her sister, which was Deborah, but you wanted to further go into it because explain what they were talking about the ghost story of the lost fellow soldier, trying to look for his daughter he never got a chance to find, and it was, and how it was filmed, it was pretty creepy. So how'd you prepare for that character, because you did a pretty solid performance playing the character?
Thank you. I definitely worked a lot with the twins to see kind of role they wanted and what sort of kind of what the background was, and a lot of it was kind of tweaking as we were filming, because I would try it one way while we were rehearsing, or we would try it a couple of different ways, and then we would get to filming it, and then, it maybe wouldn't sound as good, or maybe wouldn't look as good. And so we would just tweak it and try different ways. So it was a little bit of like a trial and error, I would think, but it was definitely a great experience to take on this character who is a more mature figure, having to deal with a grieving process like this.
Yes, and Matthew, let's talk about the Ghost of the Lost Soldier. You know, he was dressed in Union soldier garb. Who did the special effects on that creature? And the guy who was portraying the Ghost of the Soldier, man, he had those moves and mannerisms like he just nailed it.
Well, actually, the guy who was the soldier was actually Nathan. He portrayed the Specter, and it took a lot of, as far as the characterization, we did a lot of tests up front. Like we dressed Nathan in the Civil War uniform, and we would without the mask, and we would test it in our backyard, just different types of walks, and it took a long time to figure out how to get him to move, because it always felt like a guy in a suit. Like, we were always like, oh, it's got to be a character. But it was a process. And then Nathan finally found out, well, maybe if his knees are broken, like a horse fell on him and it broke his knees, and that created the wobble.
Once we figured out the backstory to him, it's like, okay, one of my arms was broken and my legs were broken at the knees, so I'd wobble. And then I was wheezing because the basic story was that there was like a grape shot or something went off. The horse fell over on top of me and killed me. So that's what's with the wheezing.
Yeah, so pretty much once we figured out a backstory that's never explained in the film, that informed how the performance would be. But it took a long time to get there, to figure out just how to get him to move. And the mask was created because it was
a Hollywood company. I can't remember for the life of me. I can't remember the name of the guy. But it was like a half mask, skeleton mask. And then we added
I just watched
a latex and toilet paper thing with green gore. Kind of, that was again the Jason Lives kind of inspiration. So I had the mask on my face, and then my neck also had latex on it. And then covering, since it was only a half mask, just the front part of my face, there was the Civil War wig that I had. But I gotta say, it was, the way we did it, it was really tough because, and I didn't know this until afterwards. I was watching the commentary for Swamp Thing, and they talked, the original Swamp Thing, and they talked about how a lot of guys in masks, it's really difficult to breathe because you're breathing in, your old oxygen.
Yeah.
So it's like the end of that half of the night, I was gone. It's like I didn't know why I was so tired, because actually we shot my part first, where the ghost comes out,
very end of the
so
film.
like over Bree's shoulder, Bree's there, and then when we shot the reverses of Bree, I wasn't there, but I was doing her audio, and I was so out of it that, like on the audio clips, it's I'm going from take 5 to the next one would be like take 8, because I was just barely there, just from the lack of oxygen. But I didn't have it on then, but I was just drained.
But how the mask was, it was like he'd put it on, and then he'd have to do his neck with
so I was
latex and toilet paper, and then he'd have to paint. What kind of paint is that?
Just regular
acrylic paint to kind of texture it and stuff. But once the mask was on, it was on all night. So because otherwise he had to take the neck off, and it took like 90 minutes or something
just to do the neck appliance. But like when you take it off, it was just filled with condensation. I mean, it looked like I went for a bath. Just my face was all sweaty.
And it
terrible.
Was really cold when we shot that movie.
It was, cold for Texans. It was 20 something, 20, 30.
Yeah.
Too cold for us.
I love the cinematography shots of the cemetery, and and it was perfect how you were saying it was like 20-degree weather. Now I can feel it because I love how it had the mysterious fog surrounding the cemetery, which gave it a good, creepy vibe. Where was the cemetery at? It was a pretty creepy cemetery.
It was, we shot the film on, our uncle has a big stretch of land, and he had kind of in the middle of the woods, he had this big hill, and that's where we constructed. We actually made a lot of
we made like 60 wooden crosses. This was during COVID, so we got a lot of free time. And then we made, I think it was 16 foam tombstones.
That we hand carved all the lettering and stuff.
And textured them and all that.
So we constructed the entire cemetery. And the thing is that at night, it's hard to light. And if you don't have like really powerful Hollywood lighting, it's really hard to get that light to stretch.
Yeah.
So there was, and if you were to see it in daylight, it's even more impressive because there are crosses that just fall off in the blackness that you don't even see.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it because it gave you a creepy vibe about it. That's what I liked about it. I mean, it was just like real eerie. And Nathaniel was, pretty creepy. The one part where Nathaniel was, the ghost specter, the part where he came behind Bree, when Bree, was right there and found, she grabbed the shovel. Yeah. She started digging because you didn't know what she was digging because there was no tombstone right there. And then when Nathaniel came as the specter right behind her, ooh, that gave me an eerie vibe, Phil.
Thank you.
And Bree, how were you feeling when you were doing that shot when Nathaniel was right behind you? You looked like you were like pretty terrified.
Yes, because I didn't know what was going on behind me for the most part. So I knew what he looked like, but he would say, "I'm just going to walk up behind you." Or I'm just going to stand over your shoulder. And I'd be like, okay, great. And, I would just hear sometimes this wheezing and this crackling, and especially being out in the middle of the night in the middle of a forest, it was like, oh, okay, I am not going to sleep tonight at all. And it didn't help that it was also, it was a little cold for me. So it was like, okay, it's cold, let's hurry up. But it's also like, what's happening behind me?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I could tell when I watched it. I mean, the look and the scare in your face was like very priceless when he was right, and then when you like turned around, he was just like gone, and you had that surprised look. You're like, huh?
Yeah, it's especially being out in the middle of a creepy forest. It's like, okay, well. Now what?
And then Matthew, towards the ending of it, I like how it ended because I actually felt for the Spectre. I'm not gonna lie, I did have a little tear in my eye for the ghost because he finally found his daughter, and you can just feel the I felt the emotion, through the Spectre because he's like, hey, of, all these years I've been dead, I finally found my lost daughter, and you can just feel like the powerful performance of the Spectre. It was like a very, powerful experience because, he really loved his daughter a lot, and you can just feel the emotion. He finally found her daughter.
Yeah, I would say that all the credit goes to Nathan's performance and Breanne's. Without the reaction, it wouldn't hold up as well. And it was really, we had prepared for it. Kind of, it's one of those things where Nathan and I had blocked it. Kind of, how is he going to kneel down, and what's his movements going? What are his movements going to be like? But it was really, I think that really came together when Nathan did ADR later on after we finished the film, and he recorded his voice. And it was one of those things where he says, "I'm going to do this stuff. I don't want you in here," because it's because it's kind of like, he's like,
yeah, it's real emotional,
kind of emotional. But
it's like I feel like an idiot if someone was watching.
But once it was put in the film, that's where, because it's like, for me, I know the story, so for the most part, I can watch my movies and just blink and stare at them.
Yeah.
But when I was watching it and I actually felt something, that surprised me. And I was like, wow, that actually could work.
Yeah, and for me also the little moment where Bree kind of has a little smile at them is just it's the icing on the cake because she sees that she will reunite with her sister someday too. So
it's a perfect reaction. And then poser Juan Carlos Enriquez came in and he really nailed it. It was one of those moments because most of our films are very lean more towards horror. So
yes,
I'm
it
not
is.
used
Yeah,
to
they are.
doing so much drama. So it was something I was very anxious about. Even when it was done, it was like, well, I felt something, but I was very concerned when it came to music. And Juan and us worked quite a bit to figure out the right tone, like if the music would be too big or when would the emotional piece really start to grow. And we tried a lot of things. I say we Nathan and I had suggestions, and Juan went out and really composed it and made it something special.
And he brought this really cool element to it where I can't remember if it's during I should have watched the movie before this. But at the end credits, I know for sure, but the instrument that's playing is actually like an 1800s child's music box.
Yeah. No kidding.
Through there, but it's a really wonderful touch that marries the image and the music.
Yeah, that's right. Because there was a time where there was going to be a music box prop, and it never made it to the actual set. It was always in the early phases of the script. There was going to be. So that was a theme we had talked about with Juan.
Yeah, and the thing is, we shot this in it was January 2021, so it's been a while. So my mind's like trying to reach back and yeah, that's right.
It was pretty good. I mean, the ending was very emotional. That's all I have to say. And I know, I mean, I've seen your, films, but, this one was like pretty emotional for like a horror short film, which really caught me off surprise. But I was very satisfied how you ended to that because, like you said, they... the Spectre, got his happy ending, and, I kind of picked it up that someday she's going to end up seeing Deborah too, which was the cool part of the icing of the cake. I mean, and also when you were talking about the music was, I'm a fan of like scores and films. I just love, I love the guy you were talking about who did your, score for you. That made it really, good and eerie too. It made the film more, how do you say it? More like moody and stuff because you didn't know where it was going to be going. You didn't know how you're feeling, where the music and the certain parts of the film was going to take you. So
yeah, and that was when it came to music. We actually, when we first did a temp score, and that's just a temporary score to give the composer kind of an idea of the tones we wanted. We had more stuff that was like synthetic music, like the fog.
Yeah,
we were like, we're going to do something like this. And Juan actually wrote some really cool, like Halloween sounding music.
Yeah, very Carpenter-esque.
But it was one of those things where it's like, this is so cool, but it didn't tonally match or marry the image.
Yeah.
That was something where we were like, we don't know what to do. And we're like sending temp tracks of The Ring. It's like something like this, maybe, kind of tonally. And then Juan figured out and he brought in cellos and stuff. And
yeah, and what he's saying, it's one of the hardest things as a filmmaker when you get something that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And then you have to cut it. Like we had there was a scene in our short prior to this, which was called No One Is Coming, and it was starring Bree. And there was this emotional scene that was incredible.
Yeah.
Really great scene. But it was weird. In context of the movie, the scene by itself was great, but in context of the movie, it just slowed it down. And it was the hardest thing to be like, okay, we need to take the emotional core of this movie and remove it. And then all of a sudden the movie was moving fast.
Yeah.
But it's a different type of movie than this one.
Yeah, that was one of those things where you have your film and it's like, that scene was the reason we made the movie. Oh, this is what the movie's about. And then when we watch the movie, it's like, where's the ghost? Where's the monster? And at the end, when we extract that, it's like, oh, it finally feels like it's moving.
Yeah.
But then it's like, oh, I just made a slasher movie and there's nothing more to
it. So, do you guys think about maybe this could be a feature film, and I can see you bring in Breanne back, as that character, and explore a little bit more, maybe, about more of the, history with her and Deborah, and go from there. I could see a horror film where it continues with her, seeking Deborah.
Yeah, tonally, that's the kind of movie we would like to make, like a feature. I think that would be really cool. Something gothic horror like that.
And like Matthew said, it's like to explore that character's obsession with finding her sister. I mean, I'm thinking back to the original Salem's Lot TV show, that, that obsession with that house. And it's like, just going with that kind of, classic 70s ghost story movie would be a lot of fun to do.
So, Breanne, you worked with the Barber Brothers before. So how'd you guys bond and make that great relationship, and you being in more of their movies?
So I've been acting for quite a while. I think since I was in 5th grade, and one of the plays I did in high school, I had to scream for one of the roles, and actually my mom and their dad worked together, and their dad was saying that the boys needed someone who could scream for one of their films, and my mom said, my daughter can scream really well. And I actually remember the boys reaching out to me and being like, yeah, so your audition for this first film is gonna be just you kind of making screaming noises. And I went over to their soundproof room and just did different types of screams for them, and that's kind of how it started.
Hey, that's pretty good. Now I'm going to go back to Matthew and Nathaniel. Like I said, I first met you guys at Nightmares Film Festival in Columbus, where you had another great short, which I loved. And man, I would love somehow to get a disc of all your short films, because all of your films you've done, for me, in my opinion, I think they're golden. That's just me. I'm not trying to blow any sunshine up your guys' asses. I just enjoy your short films. I mean, that last one I saw you guys did at Nightmares Film Festival, I have to say by far that was my favorite horror short of that whole festival.
Oh, really? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Get Out of There, actually, Breanne played the voice of the dispatch officer.
No kidding. I did not know that. But
always there.
See, I learned something tonight. I didn't know she was a dispatcher, but Get Out of There was pretty good. And I loved the creature you used in that film too. And that was just a great short too. And then when I found out about Weeping Hill, I was like, wait a second, how come I didn't see this? I'm gonna hit these brothers up. I want to see this, because I saw Get Out of There, which I really enjoyed, and I was like, man, I got to see this film. That's why I reached out to you guys, and I for some time I wanted you guys to come on the podcast too, because we didn't get a short time to really have some fun, but that's why I wanted you on the podcast as well. And then you guys were also talking about doing another short film. Wasn't it like a Vietnam horror soldier type of film?
Yeah, essentially after we finished Get Out of There, I completely forgot what the movie was called. After we finished Get Out of There, it was like barely any time passed, and Nathan was like, hey, I got this idea for this short. And it was a mini short that we did between the Vietnam War one. And it's only like a 2-minute one, but it had like a turnaround of like, we had a pre-production of like a month, and then we were shooting it. And it's only like a 2-minute thing, and it's called Shelter Half. And
I think it's so short that if we gave the synopsis, you give away the movie.
Yeah.
I don't want to know the synopsis. I just want to see it. I don't care if it's 2 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes. When you said Vietnam horror, you had my attention.
But yeah, so we did Shelter Half, and then after that we did the Vietnam horror one, Sempre Avanti. And that was one that it was just it was a brutal film to make, because it's about tunnel rats.
Yeah.
So the whole thing was kind of in these really tight spaces.
Yeah.
And we didn't feel like dragging Bree through that. It was really rough.
It was brutally rough. And that was something with someone moving around back there. But with Get Out of There, what are we talking about?
Sempre Avanti.
Yeah, we're talking about Sempre Avanti.
Okay, yeah, it was just one of those. We didn't feel like asking anyone else but ourselves to do it, because it was just us in this small little tunnel, and it was just so painful.
Yeah, it's so tight. It's like you have no room for. It feels like you have no room for your audio, for your camera,
the lighting,
and then it's like, and the stuff that we do in that movie is insane. It's actually one of my favorite shorts we've made, but man, it's kind of wild. It's a little wild. It's been a while since I'd watched it, and I watched it yesterday because I was prepping for this. So I was like, oh, I'll watch Specter of Weeping Hill. I haven't watched that in a while. And I was like, well, maybe I'll look at Sempre, because I haven't looked at Sempre because we're submitting it to festivals. So I just don't want to think about it. And
I don't want you guys to ruin it, but I want to see it, man, because you had tunnel rats, horror, Vietnam. You know that's going to be a trip just to watch.
Yeah, it's a different movie. I hope it stands out. It feels unique. But
like Matthew and I were talking, it's like they have the ones prior to that we did a bunch of ghost stories, but they're all different types of ghost stories. But they all have a little bit different of a tone. They're period films. But like No One Is Coming is another one I'd like to send you. I'm really proud of that one. I think it's like, Spectre's it's an emotional film. And I feel like No One Is Coming is a popcorn movie.
You need to send that to me. I need to watch that next, darn it. And one more question for you guys of all the independent actors and actresses and filmmakers I've talked to. Everybody knows who the Barber Brothers are. I can just mention you. It's like, I love those guys. That's what they say. Why not? You guys are great. I mean, you guys are fun to hang out with too. So, where can everybody find you on social media and your next projects?
I can be found on Instagram at mbarberfilm, and I'm also on Facebook under just Matthew Barber.
I'm drawing a blank on my Instagram. I'm Nathaniel Barber. I think it's Nathan Barber Film. I may have just ripped off of his.
It's Nathan Barber Film. How did I know that? And how about you, Breanne?
So on Facebook, I am Breanne Solis, and then on Instagram, I believe what am I on Instagram?
I know yours is Broadway Bree, right?
No, I changed it recently, actually. I'm looking, it's Breaded Burrito, so BREADED _BREATO.
Someone was thinking about Taco Bell or some Mexican food.
It's because I have celiac disease, and so I actually can't have bread.
Okay.
And so it's a funny, and my nickname is spelled BRE, so it's close to bread. So it's just a fun little nickname that my friends and I come up with.
That's awesome. And thank you guys for coming on and having fun with me tonight.
Thanks, man, for having us.
Thank you for having us.
I'll definitely have you guys on again, and of course, I'll hopefully see you at some more horror film festivals as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And also, Breanne, thank you too. And I learned
you so much.
Yeah, I learned a lot from you, especially when you were on Get Out There's a Dispatcher. Now, when I go back and watch it again, I can hear your voice. I'll be like, hey, I know that voice.
Yeah, you can picture me in your mouth while you watch it.
Exactly. And everybody, thank you for listening to Horror Pop After Midnight.